I believe in heaven, we are going to have the most razor sharp, clear, rational, logical perceptions of truth, and we are going to be the freest, most spontaneous, expressive, emotional, poetic, romantic, artsy people imaginable. And there won't be anybody walking around saying, why do they do that? Or why does he think like that? Or why can't he do this? Because everybody's going to be whole.
I think it's easy to assume that being logical and being emotional are sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, like you have to choose one or the other. But Piper doesn't buy that. I'm Dan Kruver. In this episode of Light and Truth, John Piper casts a vision of worship where reason and emotion don't compete, they harmonize. The seminar was originally delivered on Wednesday evening, September 26th, 1990.
Now, I want to direct our attention tonight to two verses and then pray with you and move into our subject matter of the what of worship and then on to some of the how of worship. And the two texts are first Romans 12, 1 and 2, which many of you know by heart. And then a text that balances that. Romans 12, 1 and 2. I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So there's a clarion call for nonconformity to the world. All right? Now, the balancing text comes from 1 Corinthians 9, verse 19, which goes like this. Though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, that I might win the more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, in order that I might win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being without law toward God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. So there's the razor's edge we're called to walk. A radical call to nonconformity to the age, balanced by a statement of radical freedom in Christ to become all things to all people. And finding a way to balance that in our church life and your individual life is a great challenge that we should pray toward, and I'd like to bow and ask God to help us. Father, how we long to be like the Apostle Paul, who, it seems to me as I read his life, was so different from the world. What he lived for and died for was of another kind than this world lives and dies for. And yet, Lord, he had the kind of freedom that enabled him to become all kinds of things to all kinds of people, that he might by all means save some. And so I pray for that freedom and that distinction, that measure of likeness to culture and that measure of radical freedom from culture. And oh Lord, may we have spiritual wisdom beyond our ability to articulate, to be what we ought to be. In Jesus' name I ask it. Amen. Let me review just a moment the definition that we're working with right now. Worship is communion with God in which believers, by grace, center their mind's attention and their heart's affection on the Lord Himself, humbly glorifying God for who He is and what He does. So what we're talking about is that at Bethlehem, I long for us to be clear-headed and sharp thinking and clear visioned about worship and whom we worship. Don't want us to be the victims of emotionalism. Emotionalism is when emotions run without the reins of the mind having any clear perception of what we're feeling. So that's what we said last week and moved into the strong statement of pursuing heart's affections as well as mind's attention. Now, we got down here to this point. The stress on combining clear, deep doctrine with strong, expressive emotion in worship always makes one group or another uncomfortable, because some are nervous about doctrine and its potential to divide and taking it to excess in what we require, like if we say you've got to believe more than you ought to believe. Another group is nervous about emotion and distrust it and fear the excesses of it. So I realize that the very stress that I'm making at Bethlehem on both deep doctrine and clear thinking and critical judgment on the one hand, and white-hot affection for God with free and spontaneous expressions of emotion on the other hand, pretty much will make everybody uncomfortable. Because there's very few people in the world who are flourishing on both sides. Right brain, left brain, that sort of stuff, you know. Most people are one or the other. And I believe in heaven, we are going to have the most razor-sharp, clear, rational, logical perceptions of truth, and we are going to be the freest, most spontaneous, expressive, emotional, poetic, romantic, artsy people imaginable. And there won't be anybody walking around saying, why do they do that? Or why does he think like that? Or why can't he do this? Because everybody's going to be whole. And my Star article from 2 weeks ago, I guess now, tried to show that we're all lame in these areas. We're all lame. We're crippled. Some are basket cases, and some are just a little bit crippled in emotions or in their reasoning. And I think it's real healthy for a church just to admit that we're all on the way in putting these two together, and that we need patience with each other and we need to move forward together. An encouragement now, and I've said this many times before, and I really want to drive it home again tonight. There are stages of emotion that please God and honor God, and yet are far short of perfection. You know, when I talk about white-hot affection, most of us realize that's a rare experience. Comes now and then, and so we wonder, well, is God displeased with my worship most of the time then? And my answer is that there are 3 stages of affections as you come into worship. The best is free, spontaneous, joyful exaltation of His grace and glory. Free, spontaneous, joyful exaltation of grace and glory would be the best way to come into worship. I'd like to be that way every Sunday. I'd like for everybody to be that way, and I know that almost nobody is that way. Very few people are so walking in the Spirit that they walk into the worship service with a hair trigger for God. Just touch me and I'll explode for Jesus. Most of us have this padlock on our trigger, and it's going to take everything the choir can do and I can do and God can do to release anybody to express genuine heartfelt affection in song. So, stage number 2, down a level, is, I shouldn't call it stage 2 then, but just down. Short of that is that freedom, the longing, that's the key word, the longing for this freedom and spontaneity and joy, and the crying out for it earnestly. So if you walk into worship and you don't have this spontaneous, joyful exaltation, but there is in your heart a longing for freedom and spontaneity and joy for Christ's sake, and you say to the Lord, oh, grant me to be free. Before this service is over, meet me and lift my heart out of these doldrums. God looks at that longing and loves it, because that longing honors Him, just the way thirst honors water. And the third, lower than that, is sometimes we come short of that, and there is only the sorrow that the longing itself is so weak, is scarcely discernible. And I believe that if you walk into the worship service and you sit down, and there's hardly even the longing, but your conscience is pricked, your heart feels broken, and you just sit there and say, I'm so sorry that I can't even muster a strong prayer of longing this morning, and I'm really sorry. That sorrow is an act of worship pleasing to the Lord, I believe. And He looks upon it with favor. He sees His own worth reflected back in your sorrow, that you can't long for His worth more than you do. So I want to make sure that when we talk about the emotions that we're pursuing, the expectation that God only accepts white-hot emotion is not true. The next phrase in the definition is, we set our mind's attention and our heart's affection on the Lord Himself. This is why we want to stress God-centeredness and vertical focus, especially on Sunday mornings. To really commune with God, we must focus on God. This takes mental effort in proportion to the degree that we are in the spirit of worship or not. If you're really in the spirit of worship, the effort is not as great as if you are thinking about 100 other things besides God as you come into worship. Then discipline is called for. The discipline of focusing your mind and saying, all right, I am not going to think about that flat tire or that argument or the dinner or the sports or my aching back or that funny perfume in front of me or anything. I am going to focus right there on the Lord in His Word. I'm going to read the bulletin. I'm going to read the hymns. I'm going to pray. I'm going after God in this service. I'm not going to let the devil distract me into secondary matters. Now that is a discipline that one learns, because many of you grew up in churches where you just absorbed a non-activity like that. You never did that. You went in there and you talked to people. You talked. I mean, I went to 9 churches on my study leave, and that's what people did. They talked about sports. They talked about the weather. They talked about everything. And then somebody got their attention from the front, and then they talked about other things. And then the service was over after a while. And you didn't get the impression anybody was saying, God is here. Let's really look at Him. Let's behold Him. Let's respond to Him. Let's commune with Him. So I just really want to underline the Lord Himself. And it takes mental effort. The best moments of climax in worship are not willful efforts to feel or do anything, but are free and spontaneous emotional responses to God's greatness and love and power and wisdom. But, as in all loving relationships, there is a place for disciplined efforts to focus and remember. In any friendship you have, the best moments are the spontaneous moments. But no friendship lives and thrives on mere spontaneity. No marriage lives or thrives on mere spontaneity. The best moments are the spontaneous moments of love, the spontaneous moments of affection, the spontaneous sexual encounters with the wife. But if the only thing you ever do is spontaneous, you won't do much. And the spontaneous things will not be as frequent if there isn't the disciplined notes. Same thing with children. My wife is in Madison, Wisconsin, doing her good deed with her sister Pam, who had a 10-pound baby boy, by the way. So I'm playing Mr. Mom, so I made the lunches for all the guys this morning. And I put a note in Benjamin's popcorn bag. You are my favorite 15-year-old in all the world. Now, I took discipline to do that. I didn't just, the note, I thought, I'm going to do something special here. And he was just in the other room, so I quick just scrawled it on the note. It's disciplined efforts that will make us You see, when he comes home tonight, it is more likely that there'll be a spontaneous conversation that you cherish with your teenagers because they're so rare, because of this disciplined effort in the morning. So there is a connection between spontaneity and discipline. So when you walk in the morning and don't feel like anything spontaneous happening with God, write him a note. Write him a note on the back of a prayer card. And send it up in the offering plate and say to somebody, pray that this note comes true in my life. Humbly glorifying God is the act of worship itself. The word itself in Greek and in Hebrew means bow down. And even in Greek, down and kiss. Proskuneo. And so the very heart of worship in its definition is a going low before a great God. Jesus had harsh words to say to those who used worship forms to call attention to themselves, making their phylacteries long, praying long prayers, wearing long robes, standing on the corner, taking the best plates in the synagogues and at the feasts. He hated the use of worship to exalt self. And I just read in Christianity Today another one of these tragic articles, and I won't even tell you what church it is because I don't know if it's true, but a man writing a 400-page book to indict a pastor of a big church and saying he's nothing but an egomaniac building a kingdom for himself. That kind of thing happens. Happens in Sunday school classes, happens in families, happens in churches, that all of a sudden there's this subtle demonic confusion between leadership and kingship and glorifying God and glorifying self. And I put here, we must be vigilant over our hearts at Bethlehem on this point, because we are known for a certain kind of worship, and we can so easily take pride in the very thing which is to be the humblest of all activities. God protect us from this. You walk such a fine line in a church that you love, a church that you are so glad what God is doing in worship, and you want to say, We've begun to taste it. It's right. It's good. And when most of our people who join the church tell the committee, I'm here because of the worship service, how easy it is for us to begin to feel smug and proud and nobody else knows how to worship. We must just stand in vigilant care over our hearts on that matter and humble ourselves again and again, lest the gift of free grace be taken from us on Sunday morning. We glorify God with a broad array of activities and inner emotions and thoughts and meditations, but we must not miss the main point in all these things. Worship is to show God to be blindingly glorious, infinitely worthy, breathtakingly beautiful, awesome in power and inscrutable in wisdom, and limitless in knowledge, and tender in mercy, and terrible in wrath, and the source and foundation of all truth and goodness and beauty. It's one of the greatest things in the world is have to write a sentence like that. It took me, 5 minutes to write that sentence because I had to stop and say, all right, now, what's the other thing I love about you? What's the other thing I stand in awe of about you? I write that down. And I commend to you in your journaling or whatever you do in your devotions to discipline yourself to wait upon the Lord to come up with phrases like this. I can copy those from anywhere. I just thought, what do I like about God? One of these days I'm going to write a book. It's just kind of simmering now on the back burner called Why I Stand in Awe of God. I love that title. I've got the title. Now I just need a book. Why I Stand in Awe of God. And I want it to be 365 daily readings with just a reason for standing in awe of God every day. That a person could open, read one page, just one page of why I stand in awe of God today, why I stand in awe of God tomorrow. Because we just gravitate away from that. We get up and we think about why I'm so angry about this car I have that breaks down, and very few people are in your life telling you reasons for why to stand in awe of God. How many people can you count on your hands that each day help you stand in awe of God? So I just encourage you to do this sort of thing for yourself, that listing out of things that move you about God. When it says that worship is humbly glorifying God, you need to realize that in the Bible, the ways to glorify God in worship are numerous. Worship, praise, these are all quotes now from the Bible. Exult in, extol, magnify, thank, love, rejoice, glorify, exalt, serve, stand in awe, fear, bless, shout for joy, sing to, sing of, sing praise to, be glad in, delight in, clap hands before, behold the beauty of, boast in, lift up hands to, make a joyful noise to, ascribe unto, pray to, cry out to, and so on. There's the list. It would be great for you in your own reading through the book of Psalms. All these are from Psalms. They don't even count all the other parts of the Bible. Just to list the ways to focus on the Lord and humbly glorify Him. The last phrase of the definition of worship, in response. All worship is response to God. He's the initiator. He's the revealer. We are the responder. We see and respond in response to who He is and what He does. And this is just another way of saying that God must be central. Focus must be on Him. We must call ourselves back again and again from church life to God life. We must pray and pray and pray again that God will be preeminent and supreme.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Light and Truth, where we are committed to providing God-centered preaching to help you see Christ clearly and treasure Him truly. I'm your host, Dan Kruver. On our next episode, John Piper continues our 9-part series, The Shape of Worship in a Changing World, with a seminar titled, Worship on a Cultural Continuum. I hope you'll join us. For more resources, visit desiringgod.org.